What is the job that marketing should get done in a company?
So when I first saw this question, my cynical answer was to make money for the company. But then I thought about it a little bit deeper, and I decided that the answer is it's to convince people it's in their best interest to do something, and it works best if it actually is in their best interest to do that thing.
That's Stephanie Yoder. And if you want to master content, you need to listen to her. She spent a decade as a travel writer, then jumped into content marketing, and is now the director of content for Rebrandly, which is a software that does smart links. I love her grounded takes throughout this conversation on marketing, content, but especially AI. I hope you also enjoy our insights, and before we get back to the conversation, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show where we explore what marketing is. I won't tell you what to think, I'll help you improve how you think about marketing and life. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. This was recorded on May 23rd, 2025. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associated organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional marketing or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here. So tell me maybe, because I also sometimes land on revenue, money, that. How did you then get from that money to kind of this convincing or swaying the prospect, the audience to buy into, but then also that it is good for them? I like that part. But how did you get there, or what was like some of the things that prompted you to expand your definition?
Last weekend, my neighborhood had a yard sale day. And my daughter, who is 8 years old, she wanted to sell these little 3D printed figurines that my husband was making, and she wanted to raise money for the local animal shelter. So she was really excited to do this. And unfortunately, when we woke up on Saturday morning, it was really overcast and kind of rainy. And I was like, oh no, nobody's actually going to show up to buy these things. And she spent all this time planning it. So I thought about it, and I went on our neighborhood Facebook group, and I posted a picture of her with her like little setup and stuff. I said, stop by our house and we have free chocolate chip cookies, and you can play with our bunnies, because we have these two giant Flemish rabbits. They're sort of neighborhood famous. So I was like, free bunny pats and cookies to anyone who shows up. And let me tell you, she made like $50 selling these things, and they're like $1 each. So many people showed up, and I was like, see, Marcella, this is marketing. This is what mommy does for a living. And she didn't care. But it got me thinking a bit about, why did people show up? Why did they come? Oh, one, because there's a cute little girl that they wanted to help out. But two, it was like, oh, free chocolate chip cookies. But then once they were there, it was like, okay, let's also buy this thing. So yeah, that kind of had me thinking a bit about, what is marketing? We didn't necessarily do this to make money. It's to be part of our community and to like help my daughter. Basically offering people something that was in their best interest to show up. And they did.
Because I automatically think of those chocolate chip free cookies as maybe some document lead gen, like you're sharing, like I instantly.
This is a loss leader, Marcella.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it's so cool too in those moments, I think, in marketing, but probably in a lot of professions, when you can actually really illustrate the thing you do to your children, where it's not just this black box of mommy and daddy are going behind computers, or whatever, engineers too, I can only imagine. I love that, because I think it is this balance of, I don't want to say giving away, but kind of giving things or enticing or trying to make people see there's value in it. And then when they get there, they also then I don't want to say fall into it, but they see value in then that purchase or that thing because of the story or whichever. And that for me is like you kind of created or generated demand. How do you think about marketing in those terms? Because that for a while, and maybe it still is, like demand generation was such a big thing on LinkedIn, and it makes sense of like marketing's job is to kind of generate that demand, but then also there probably is demand that you can just capture. Do you use that framing at all in your work, or do you not really think in those terms?
Yeah, well, I think that ties back to that second component of what I said, where marketing works best when it really is in people's best interest to do the thing you want them to do, because that's a much easier story to tell than if you have to sort of invent reasons that people should buy something. And especially, I work mostly in SaaS, and there's 10 trillion different SaaS products out there of varying degrees of utility. And my background is agency work, and so I've worked with a lot of different brands. And in my experience, content marketing has been so much more successful when it is something that genuinely is useful for people, and all you have to do is really connect the dots as to why.
And maybe this is a big question, but I think I have like a hypothesis, but how do you do that? My hypothesis is like knowing who your audience very well to the point at which they would see those things as valuable. But in the work you've done, content, SaaS, all that world, how have you, I don't want to say actualized, but acted on that definition of how have you created useful things that is in their best interest? You probably had to understand what is their interest or what they are interested or all of that, or how'd you go about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it comes from really knowing and understanding your audience, and absolutely best if you can like talk to them and like meet them, and even better if you are them. Like the product Rebrandly that I work for now, our major audience is marketers, and it kind of feels like cheating because I'm like, okay, I actually know what marketers need and want, so it's a lot easier to connect to that use case. But something that I talk about a lot is empathy powered marketing, and that is particularly in content marketing is about creating resources that are genuinely useful for people, and not just pumping out content for the sake of it or making something because it makes the C-suite feel good or like it's something the company wants to have published, but actually things people want and need to know and read.
How do you see, I can't believe I waited 6 minutes before bringing AI in. How do you see AI kind of shifting? Because I'm kind of in the content, that's some of my background too. And I think it's one of those areas that's just being flooded right now with good and more or less a lot of bad uses. How do you see AI helping with that? Or do you see some ways that it's either hindering or creating roadblocks to
Yeah.
delivering useful content?
It's a Friday today, and this week has kind of felt like the AI apocalypse with Google announcing their new search and all of that. I think it can both help and hurt depending on how you look at it and how you use it. I think that we've already seen and we will continue to see there's a lot of really opportunistic people who think that AI will be the way to pump out huge amounts of content at scale, whether it's good quality or not, which I think is probably a losing. I mean, we'll see, time will tell, but to me, it seems like a losing proposition. I think that the internet is very quickly filling with garbage that nobody actually wants to read, um, which sucks. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for people who are willing to go that extra mile and be a little more thoughtful. And I think you are going to see a greater emphasis on human traits and humanity in content, because personally I don't want, if you didn't take the time to write something, why would I want to take the time to read it? um, and I think a lot of other people feel that same way, so I think you're going to see an opportunity for people to sort of rise above the garbage heap, if you will.
Yes, I like how you touch on some of those human aspects, but even my mind goes to like creating content with people. Now, maybe in the future, there's an AI agent that can go to a Zoom call, talk somehow to a customer, pull those insights, but like that content seems to be a bit of a moat because it's hard for AI to go and interview 7 content marketers and getting their themes and thoughts. How do you think about kind of just maybe that mode, like what are you thinking about of like content that is unique, or how do you create content in the world of AI, because it is being flooded with so much garbage, same looking content, see a sameness. How have you thought about standard? Is it through interviews of or co-creating content, or where has your mind gone for that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because my first thought was I use Fathom AI for a lot of my calls, and it's actually really great, especially for case studies, because it takes the recording and it generates like the key bullet points for you. Like you still have to do the interview, but like it does make it a lot easier to synthesize that information. So even there, I think AI is making inroads. I think probably the distinction is going to be original thought, really critical thinking, because that is something AI can't actually do. AI takes a bunch of information on the internet and it synthesizes it and it spits something out. It can't have new ideas. That's something only humans can do. And that's, I think, where you're going to see that differentiation. In thought leadership, yes, but I think if you look at like Ahrefs, for example, does a lot of really great investigative content, specifically around AI at the moment. But, looking at the way things are changing and the way people need to adapt and just sort of not just relaying information, but actually drawing new thoughts from that information.
Makes this kind of, I've heard it, strategic point of view, or some of these kind of points where a lot of people, I don't want to say shy away from that, but they're like, let's just not make a hard stand. Let's not kind of call out maybe the future, which is unknown, but now that becomes even more of a blue ocean for people willing to take those, to make a bet, to say those things, because yeah, to your point, AI, it would be really hard to have an AI create an original thought, to your point, as it's using so much information that's already out there. Now, you mentioned earlier this thought of like time to create. And I've had many conversations with people of like, I don't want to read that because like the human didn't write it, which then there's a bit of baked into that of this conversation of like, there's no sweat, there's no time into it. How do you then balance? Because to be honest, I don't really care if the book I'm reading took 10 years or 1 year or 5 months if it's helping me make progress on the things I need to make progress on. So how do you balance that? Because I agree with you that sometimes I'm like, oh, that only took you 5 minutes. That's not valuable. Do we need to break out of that mindset that like sooner or later it won't matter how long things take to make, because if you put original thought through transcriptions or whatever, it can create stuff quickly? Or do you still believe there'll be a love and yearning for things that have taken a while to make?
I mean, I think it probably depends on the jurisdiction.
Sure.
Novels, for example, are probably different than SaaS marketing
Yeah.
articles.
True.
And
Sticking to
to be clear, I'm not anti-AI. I use AI a lot in my content creation to speed up the process. I mean, you kind of have to these days. And I think it is a valuable tool for that. I think where the distinction lies is maybe it's not just like if you didn't take the time to write it, it's like if you didn't think about it at all. I don't want to read, if I want to read recycled text, I could go talk to Claude myself, right?
Nope, I agree. Yeah, so it's almost less of time and more of thought, like how much thought
Effort.
went into
Not
it,
even effort, yeah, but thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and in willing to take different angles, or again feed it a lot of context. But no, I'm with you too. I just enjoy conversations about things like this, and politics are similar, where you see a lot of people on polar ends or like the poles, but then I'm always like, I feel like the middle ground is kind of the path forward of like not relying fully on it, but also not being maybe one of the creatives that I've seen on LinkedIn kind of saying like, oh, it's taking away all creativity, I'm not using it all. And it's like, that's a tough stance, and we'll see if that pays off. But I do think your approach, and similarly to mine, kind of embedding it in certain areas in the workflow is kind of the future. Like you almost
Yeah.
have to.
And I think we also have to consider like we are marketing creatives, so we probably have a certain viewpoint that my husband is in tech but not a creative, and he uses ChatGPT for everything. And like we have this like running argument where I'm like, if I wrote you a love note with ChatGPT, that wouldn't mean as much. And he's like, no, it would be the same. I'm like,
Hmm.
it's just like people do have different perspectives on it as well.
And I think even to that, the perspectives will continually change. I mean, I just think of the internet. I'm quite young, but like putting your credit card into the internet, right? Like early on, few people did that. And then like sooner or later, and then even like FaceTime, it was like, if you ask someone in 1940, 1950, 70, like, would it be as valuable to see your loved one over camera if they even understood that? Like
Yeah.
they would probably be like, no, like the value goes. But I've had a lot of great conversations over FaceTime and even these podcasts where it's completely virtual. So I do think our preferences and what we're okay with and what we're comfortable with change, and to the point of like, I think about that a lot too, of like, not maybe love letters, but like, yeah, if you just purely copy and paste something from chat, it really removes that like emotion or you from it. But I agree with you. It is interesting, different domains, how they use it, and maybe their quickerness to adapt than us marketing, creative, artist type people. No,
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point is people's perspectives do change, and it feels like this is all happening very fast, and the way we interact with AI is, and I think that's what makes it a little bit scary is like we don't know in 10 years what our relationship is going to be to AI, but I imagine it'll be extremely different than it is right now. So like that's a particular challenge for marketers is like how are we going to roll with that and like stay on top of those changes. But I think it's maybe similar to the social media revolution. You know, I'm a little bit older. Like I remember in the early 2010s and stuff when Twitter became big and all of these other social media things, and everyone had to learn and adapt really quickly to using that as a tool.
yeah, and there's probably like a larger conversation around there's the using Twitter X, but then the underlying principles that essentially undergird social in general of like it's not a broadcast tool, it's a two-way street. And some of those probably have changed because I think that's something I see with AI a lot is we just instantly with like we did with the internet, we bring our old thinking directly to it, which is how like the horseless carriage syndrome got kind of coined is like the car wasn't a car. It was based off the past invention, which was carriages with horses, but this one was horseless. And I think that's always the thought with us is, and I've seen this with people, is like they'll brainstorm with AI and it's like they just took the first output and it's like, that's like really, really low quality of like how this AI now works, that you can kind of even put your own voice into it, which I use Super Whisper to like talk for 5 minutes into the chat box, and all these new ways that it's like I'm actually working with the machine. I'm not yelling at it to tell like an intern telling it what to do. But
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting when you get to the people who are kids now, who when they're older, they're going to have this sort of native relationship with AI, and that's going to be very trippy.
yeah, I have a 5-6 month old, and I'm thinking a lot about that just because of how much has already changed within the last few months and where it'll be when she's 10. And I think I actually had a conversation with someone. I'm definitely on the side of not shying away from it, in the sense of, but also like I don't want my kids to have technology in their hands. But I also, a tangential thought on that was I was talking with an intern. I started writing almost daily, probably 8 years ago. And I was talking with her and I said, if I had AI when I first started, because we were kind of having like, how do I use AI? Do I just have it write the first draft? All these things. And I'm like, well, writing's thinking. So if you're outsourcing that first draft to AI, but the whole point of it was like, if I was where you are today, I would have to make a really hard decision on how do I get my writing chops good by not ignoring AI, but not totally substituting the thought and the work that goes into writing that AI. What are your thoughts on initially that?
I think that is a very real concern that I have about AI is if we and there have been like some preliminary studies done that like people who rely really heavily on AI are not so good at critical thinking. So how do you preserve those skills? I think it's extremely important, especially in this modern environment we are currently in. We really need people to be able to think critically. And yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that is maybe the scariest thing about AI to me.
Yeah, I've not gone on those or deep into those research papers. I've seen them, but it scared me so much because I felt that even in my own realm where it's like anything I get, I'm like, let me go right to Claude, let me go right to chat versus thinking first. I'm like, no, this is a problem. Well, maybe in the far future, Stephanie, we'll bring you on for a Friends episode and we'll have more answers to these really big existential questions. But are you ready now to switch it to maybe more important conversation on the life front?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I know this answer is going to be very much so for you, so don't try to answer for all humans, but what do you believe the purpose, the job of life is? What should we be striving, aiming for?
Well, first let me say this is so much harder than what is the job of marketing.
For
Because
real.
obviously there's not one size fits answer. I think that the job of life is to find out what will make you happy and to pursue it responsibly. And I think that's because there's a lot of different ways to be happy and a lot of different things that people find make them happy. For me, what makes me happy is to have a wide breadth of interesting experiences. So, my background, I'm always saying I'm like an accidental content marketer because I actually started my career in travel writing and travel blogging. And I graduated from college way back in 2007, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was like, well, if I don't know what I want to do, I might as well not know in England. So I got a work visa and I went to England and I worked there for a while and still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided I wanted to backpack around the world and it was going to take me a couple years to save up to do this. So I started a blog because I didn't know very many Americans who were doing things like this. It's much more popular in other parts of the world. And then to my surprise, people started reading this blog. So that by the time I actually was ready to quit my job, I realized, oh, maybe I can get away with doing this for a while. So for about 10 years, I was a travel blogger. I also did freelance writing. I wrote for like airline magazines and also for like hotel companies and things. I was actually a content marketer, but did not know that's what that was. But point being, I got to travel all over the world. I got to have so many fun experiences. I actually met my husband. He was also a travel blogger, so that's how we met. Um, and we had so much fun. And then after I started my family and had my daughter, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be traveling so much. I need to figure out a way to actually make money. And the one thing I know how to do is writing. So that's how I got into content marketing. But the point I'm trying to make is it was not a conventional career path. And I'm really glad I did it that way, even though when I did finally sort of start in a corporate job, I was behind a lot of people my age. But I got to have all of these experiences and go all of these wonderful places and do all of these things. And it was so amazing. And I still love to travel, and we still do travel quite a bit with our daughter. But for me, that was a really important thing that I need to do to feel happy.
And why I will go deeper on the responsible piece of that because I thought that was a unique question. And I think maybe I have an idea of why you added that. Just the fact of like you can't just chase happiness if it isn't going to either help your family stay afloat or if it's like hurting others. But maybe talk to me first about why happiness, it seems, is that North Star or that thing at which you're directing your life. And for you, it's a lot of different experiences or different things, and everyone will have a different kind of what fills their bucket or what, gives them joy. But why is happiness that North Star for you? Was there a point in your life that you realized if I'm not happy, like I don't want to be, like all these other things aren't important if happiness is gone? Or did you just have that from your parents, or did someone share that with you to help you know that I want to strive to be happy?
I don't know, doesn't everyone want to be happy? I think happiness is a really broad thing because for some people, happiness means like living a life of service for other people. For some people, happiness maybe means just making a big bucket of money, I guess. For, for some people, happiness, means having children. For some people, it means not having children. And like, I think everybody should be free to make those choices for themselves. But I also think it can be hard to know what will make you happy. And that's sort of the main tension or struggle in a lot of people's lives is figuring that out. And I think for a lot of people, they have this idea like, okay, I will go to school, I will get a job, I will start a family, and that's what's going to make me happy. And then many people realize, oh no, that's not it. So I think it sounds simplistic, but it's actually very hard to know what is going to make you happy in life.
No, that's a great point. Taking a step back and asking or feeling, what are those things? What makes me happy? Because I do find through many different, whether spiritual approaches or just different great thinkers, there's this common trope of like, we go out there, whether it's a prodigal son story or whatever it is, and we go out in the world and we try to find the thing that'll fulfill us. And sadly, most times, like the prodigal son story, we realize like none of this was worth it. And there's also a Thomas Merton quote, which if the three people who listen to this podcast are so angry, I bring this up almost every episode. But it's like you put your ladder against a wall and you climb that wall and you look around and you realize the wall over there or another wall was the one I was supposed to climb. Because I struggle with this thought of like, I don't know, I feel like happiness is a lot of inward things and not always like achievements or like, and that maybe is where like some smarter people will like start to break down happiness and joy, or like happiness is an extrinsic thing while joy in that is like something you have within you. And for me, I don't always see those differences, but how do you think about that of like, it seems that even as a traveler, maybe I've had friends who love traveling because it gives them new experiences. And I also have people who travel in the sense of like move places because they're just trying to run from themselves and they can never get farther from that being in which it was in you. How do you think about
Yeah.
happiness, joy, and all of that?
Well, I think it's something that can change a lot over time too. Because when I was in my 20s, yes, like being a digital nomad and moving around the world made me really happy. Now that I am just turned 40, I'm finding like a lot of small things actually make me really happy. Like going to bed early with a good book, which sounds so lame, but like, like really individual moments of happiness as opposed to like I'm living this dream lifestyle that is happy. And I think it changes for everyone. So, I don't know if I said this right when I first said, but the job of life is to find out what makes you happy, right? And that is maybe a lifelong pursuit because it's going to change and it's going to evolve with the circumstances of your life and your personal preferences and all of that.
That makes sense, which is kind of not to bring AI back into it, but it's just this constant like changing of what we find to be enjoyable. And even too, I've found the capacity to just enjoy. Sometimes I will pray and I'll ask for more things to enjoy, however I might phrase that, whether it's like, give me a promotion, give me a new car. But then I realize, but there's also a side of it of that I can increase my ability to enjoy the things that which are already here. Unless I'm asking what makes me happy, and to the point that you're bringing up, I won't really know. And I think that's where there's a lot of these theories, whether mimetic theory, where it's like we essentially are just mimetic beings. We're trying to mimic what we've seen before if we don't take the time to fully ask what makes me happy. And then I think the part that I kind of touched on earlier of just this responsibleness, because my struggle with that happiness is I then think about, the whole P. Diddy trial. I think he was probably happy during a lot of that. And
But
now
I've
you
seen a
can
lot
call,
of people really terribly
yeah, so,
unhappy,
and
right?
that's that responsibleness, and maybe that's not even happy, and that's just pleasure, and that's where vice is, and kind of that is like a challenge where it's vice virtue, which you choose, and happiness might be the virtue where pleasure or satisfaction. I just think of hedonism versus kind of like the opposite. How do you then wrestle through that? And is the responsible just that key word that really helps you be like, you have to search for it and find it responsibly, not hurting others or, you know,
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen the show The Good Place, but that's a great show that covers a lot of this. But, one of the things they talk about a lot in that show is, what we owe each other. And, I think what we owe each other is not to try not to make other people actively unhappy, which, obviously is easier said than done. I buy too much stuff on Amazon that's not good for the world, things like that. But at the same time, I think, and you're a parent too, it's like if you make a decision to have children, then you have a responsibility to those children to keep them safe and happy and like raise them. Part of the reason we stopped moving around so much is, we had our daughter and I was like, okay, like moving around a lot is great if you are an adult. It's not that great if you're a little kid. Like kids need stability and community. We're gonna live here in Durham at least till she graduates high school because that's our responsibility to her. And I like it. I mean, it's a sacrifice, but it's not a terrible sacrifice. But yes, we have a responsibility to other people to not make the world worse for others.
I love it. I love it. All right, Stephanie, to round off the show here, I have a final question. There's this movie, Inception, Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. It's about these individuals who usually malicious reasons, but they go into people's dreams to incept an idea. So then tomorrow that person wakes up and they're like, I'm going to sell my company. I'm going to give away my shares to this person. So rather than malicious, maybe more benevolent, what would be an idea you would go in the minds of every person, not just marketers, so staying on this life topic, what would you go in their minds tonight and incept so tomorrow we all wake up and the idea you incepted we live out of as our own idea? What is that idea you're incepting?
Okay, I'm going to figure out how to say this without sounding too political.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I would love to accept the idea in people that other people's happiness does not take away from your happiness, and that other people's lives matter. Um, it's like that Onion article that's like, I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people. Like, I don't know why this is not obvious to people, but you should care about other people who aren't you and your immediate family. I think the world would be a much better place if people could internalize that.
Yeah, I love that we can accept that others can be happy. Like, we don't need to enforce our thinking, our ways on them. And if they're happy and to the point of responsible and they're not hurting people or doing things, why crush them or why? Yeah. No, I love that so much, Stephanie. And I think right now, at least in America where I'm at, that's definitely needed. So hopefully maybe tonight we can all wake up tomorrow with that idea. But thank you so much for that idea and for your time and your thoughts today. This was a great conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.